For a moment, just for a moment, every journalist covering this war had the same reaction. Is this real? Vladimir Putin, the man who launched the largest land war in Europe since World War II, has proposed his choice of mediator for peace negotiations. His choice? Gerhard Schröder, Germany's former chancellor, 82 years old. The man who, after leaving office, took a job as the chairman of the board of Rosneft, Russia's state oil company. The man who, as Germany's chancellor, was personally close to Putin, so close that Putin called him a true friend. The man who, after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, refused to resign from his positions in Russian state energy companies and argued that the war could be ended through negotiation with Putin. The man who is, by any reasonable definition, a registered lobbyist for Russian state interests. Putin wants him to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. Zelensky's response came in under 30 seconds. Absolutely not.
Kaja Kallas, the EU's foreign policy chief, added 4 words that summarize the entire situation. It is clear why Putin wants him. This is the most absurd diplomatic gambit of this entire war, and today we are telling the full story of why Putin chose Schroeder, why Zelensky rejected him instantly, and what this proposal reveals about Russia's actual approach to ending the conflict. Welcome back. Let's get into it. Before we can understand why Putin's Schroeder proposal is so audacious, you need to understand who Gerhard Schröder actually is. Because if you're not German, or if you've been following this war without deep European political context, the name might not immediately tell you everything it tells a European diplomat. Gerhard Schröder served as Chancellor of Germany from 1998 to 2005, 7 years as the leader of Europe's largest economy. He was, by any measure, a significant figure in European and global politics. His tenure included Germany's refusal to join the Iraq War, a genuinely principled position that earned him significant credibility across Europe. He focused on economic reform, European integration, and, crucially, energy policy. It is the energy policy that matters most for understanding what comes next. Under Schröder's chancellorship, Germany deepened its energy relationship with Russia, specifically through the Nord Stream pipeline project. Nord Stream 1, the undersea natural gas pipeline connecting Russia directly to Germany, was planned during Schröder's time in office. In 2005, in the final weeks of his chancellorship, Schröder approved a loan guarantee for the pipeline worth over €1 billion. And then, weeks after leaving office, having approved a loan guarantee for a Russian state-backed pipeline, Schröder took a job with the pipeline company. He became chairman of the shareholders committee of Nord Stream AG. Later, he became chairman of the board of directors of Rosneft, Russia's largest state oil company, a position he held even after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The German parliament stripped him of his office, staff, and budget in 2022 after he refused to resign from his Russian company positions. His own Social Democratic Party repeatedly called on him to step down. He refused. He maintained that his close personal relationship with Putin, they have celebrated birthdays together, have been photographed together at social events, could be an asset in diplomatic engagement. He positioned himself throughout 2022 and 2023 as a potential back-channel communicator between the Kremlin and the West. Most Western governments treated him as exactly what the evidence suggested he was, a former political leader who had taken lucrative positions in Russian state companies after leaving office, who maintained personal loyalty to Putin, and who was willing to put those relationships to use in ways that served Russian interests. This is the man Putin has proposed as the mediator between Russia and Ukraine. Let's think about this from Putin's perspective, because the Schröder proposal, absurd as it appears to most Western observers, has a certain internal logic from the Kremlin's point of view. Putin's fundamental problem with international mediation is trust. Russia does not trust American mediators. It views Washington as fundamentally hostile. Russia does not trust British mediators. Russia does not trust French or German official mediators. It views European institutions as instruments of NATO pressure on Moscow. Who does Russia trust? People who have demonstrated, through their actions and their choices, a willingness to maintain relationships with Moscow even under enormous Western pressure. People who have accepted positions in Russian state companies. People who have refused to condemn the war even when every Western political leader demanded they do so. Schroeder fits this profile perfectly. He is German, which matters because Germany is the largest economy in Europe, and its chancellor is one of the most powerful voices on Ukraine policy. Having a German associated with the mediation effort gives Russia cover. Look, even the Germans are engaging with us. He has existing personal relationships with Putin, which, from Russia's perspective, is a prerequisite for any mediator who will be trusted with sensitive communications. He has demonstrated loyalty to Russian interests, even at enormous personal political cost, losing his staff, his office, his party support, his reputation in Germany, rather than resign from Russian company positions after the invasion. And, perhaps most importantly, he is not part of the official Western diplomatic architecture. He is a private citizen, a former leader, someone whose mediation role would not require Moscow to deal with NATO institutions, European Council mechanisms, or American diplomatic apparatus. From Putin's perspective, Schröder is the most credible Western-adjacent figure who is genuinely willing to engage with Russia's position. He has paid the price for that engagement, the price of being ostracized by mainstream European politics, and he kept paying it rather than abandoning Russia. That makes him, in Putin's calculus, trustworthy in a way that official Western mediators are not.
Zelensky's rejection of the Schroeder proposal was so fast and so absolute that it almost didn't require explanation. But the explanation, when it came, was comprehensive. Absolutely not. That was the first response. 2 words, no ambiguity. Then Zelensky elaborated, and his elaboration focused on exactly the issue that makes Schroeder's appointment impossible from Ukraine's perspective. A mediator must be trusted by both parties. That is the foundational requirement of any mediation. A mediator who is perceived, correctly, based on documented evidence, as representing one side's interests cannot fulfill the role. Not because of bias in their personal views, but because the other party cannot bring its genuine concerns, its red lines, its confidential positions to a process it believes will transmit those positions directly to the adversary. Schroeder is a paid employee of Russian state companies. He has personal relationships with Putin that predate the war by decades. He refused to condemn the invasion when every European political leader, including his own party colleagues in Germany, demanded he do so. From Ukraine's perspective, sitting across a mediation table from Schroeder is sitting across from a Putin ally. Everything Ukraine says would be assessed through the lens of Schroeder's relationships with Moscow. Every Ukrainian red line would be vulnerable. This is not about Schroeder's personal character or his intentions. It is about structure. A mediator paid by one of the parties cannot mediate the other party's interests effectively. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas expressed exactly this logic in 4 devastating words. It is clear why Putin wants him. Not, Schroeder is biased. Not, this is a bad choice. But, it is clear why Putin wants him. Those 4 words say everything. Putin wants Schroeder because Schroeder's loyalties run toward Moscow. Putin is not proposing a neutral mediator. Putin is proposing a mediator who, by his own choices over the past 4 years, has aligned himself with Russian interests. Germany reacted with immediate skepticism. A German official, speaking on condition of anonymity to Reuters, said the proposal was not credible because Russia had not changed its conditions for ending the war. The mediator question is secondary. What matters is Russia's actual conditions, which remain maximalist regardless of who sits between the parties. Gerhard Schröder is the most prominent example of a phenomenon that has been documented extensively throughout this war. The phenomenon of former Western politicians who maintain relationships with Moscow in ways that serve Russian strategic interests. Let's look at the pattern. Schroeder is the most obvious case. Former German Chancellor, chairman of Russian state energy companies, personal friend of Putin. refused to condemn the invasion, positioned himself as a potential back-channel communicator, but he is not alone. France's Nicolas Sarkozy, former French president, has made public statements sympathetic to Russian positions throughout the war, arguing that Ukraine should make territorial concessions to Russia to end the fighting. Italy's Silvio Berlusconi, before his death in 2023, maintained a personal friendship with Putin and was recorded making sympathetic comments about Russia's motivation for the invasion, blaming NATO expansion rather than Russian aggression. Hungary's Viktor Orbán, a sitting head of government rather than a former one, has been the most consistently pro-Russia voice within the EU, blocking sanctions packages, arguing against military aid to Ukraine, and maintaining personal diplomatic engagement with Putin that no other EU leader has pursued. Slovakia's Robert Fico, who sat in Putin's Victory Day Parade VIP section, has expressed views on the war that align more closely with Moscow's narrative than with the position of his EU partners. The pattern is a significant number of European political figures, some former, some current, have maintained relationships with Moscow that go beyond what their official positions would require, and that have provided Russia with diplomatic cover, propaganda material, and political leverage within European institutions. Russia's proposal of Schroeder as mediator is not random. It is the most visible deployment of this network, an attempt to use one of the most prominent figures from this group to shape the peace process in ways favorable to Russian interests. Zelensky's rejection is not just a rejection of one individual. It is a rejection of the entire framework that this network represents. The idea that men who chose Russian money and Russian relationships over Western democratic solidarity can play a neutral role in ending a war that Russia started. Here is what Putin's Schroeder proposal reveals about Russia's actual approach to diplomacy in this war, and why it matters for understanding the Istanbul talks and everything that follows. A country that genuinely wants to end a war proposes a mediator that both parties can accept. This is the basic requirement. The mediator must be trusted by both sides, must have no financial or personal interests that compromise their neutrality, must be seen as genuinely capable of representing both parties' concerns fairly. There are candidates who fit this description. Pakistan has been playing a genuine mediator role in the Iran-US negotiations. Turkey's Erdogan has positioned himself as a facilitator. Saudi Arabia has offered its services. The UN Secretary General has attempted mediation. Putin proposed Schroeder. The choice of a mediator tells you what the proposing party actually wants from the mediation. If Russia had proposed someone genuinely neutral, someone with no financial ties to Russian state companies, no personal friendship with Putin, no record of refusing to condemn the invasion, that would signal genuine interest in a process that produces a fair outcome. Proposing Schroeder signals something different. It signals that Russia wants a mediation process in which its interests are protected by the mediator himself, where Russian red lines are understood and sympathetically conveyed, where Ukrainian positions are filtered through a lens that has been demonstrably sympathetic to Moscow. It is, in Callas's 4 words, clear why Putin wants him. And that clarity is itself the most important thing about the proposal. Not the specific choice of Schroeder, not the biographical details of his career or his Russian company affiliations. The clarity of purpose that the choice reveals. Russia is not genuinely seeking neutral mediation. Russia is seeking mediation that protects Russian interests while creating the appearance of a fair process. Zelensky rejected it in 30 seconds because the appearance is not good enough. Ukraine needs a process that actually works, not one that looks like it works while delivering Russian outcomes. Let's end with a constructive question. If not Schroeder, who? The characteristics of an effective mediator for this conflict are clear. Must be trusted by Ukraine, which means no financial ties to Russian state entities, no record of sympathizing with Russian positions, no personal friendship with Putin. Must be accepted by Russia, which means not someone Russia perceives as a Western instrument or a NATO advocate. Must have genuine diplomatic credibility, experience, standing, the ability to command attention from both sides. must be willing to put in the sustained effort that ending this war requires. Not a single meeting, but months of patient engagement. Who meets these criteria? Turkey has positioned itself well. Erdogan has maintained relationships with both sides. Turkey is a NATO member, which reassures Ukraine, but has not joined Western sanctions on Russia, which preserves its access to Moscow. The Istanbul process, for all its limitations, demonstrates that Turkey can convene both sides. The Vatican has been engaged. Pope Leo XIV has spoken publicly about the war and has received Rubio during Iran nuclear talks. The Vatican's moral authority and its long-standing neutrality make it a possible facilitator. India, which has maintained relationships with both Russia and the West, has occasionally been mentioned as a potential mediator. Modi's government has not joined Western sanctions and maintains arms purchases from Russia while also deepening its relationship with the United States. China, the most powerful of Russia's remaining relationships, has the leverage to be decisive. If Beijing decided to actively pressure Moscow toward a negotiated settlement, that pressure would be more effective than anything the West can generate. Whether China is willing to exercise that leverage is the unanswered question. What these candidates have in common: none of them owe their income to Russian state companies. None of them have spent the past 4 years refusing to condemn an invasion their own party colleagues condemned. None of them would face the immediate, justified rejection that Schroeder received in 30 seconds. The Schroeder proposal failed because it was obviously not designed to succeed. It was designed to test whether Russia could insert a friendly figure into the mediation process. The answer came in 30 seconds. No. Putin chose Gerhard Schröder as his preferred mediator. Schroeder, 82 years old, former German Chancellor, current employee of Russian state oil companies, personal friend of Putin. 30-second rejection from Zelensky. Callas said it best. It is clear why Putin wants him. It is clear, 4 words, the whole story. A country that genuinely wants peace proposes a mediator both sides can trust. Russia proposed a man paid by Russian state companies. And Ukraine said no in the time it takes to read a text message. Share this video, hit like, subscribe, because the real mediator, if this war is ever to end, has yet to be agreed upon. And finding that person is the next challenge. See you there.